What's so important about patriotism? That is the question that we're going to look at here tonight. And since it's 4th of July is right around the corner, it makes sense that we would talk about the French. Yeah, why not? And that's where I'm going to start. We're going to talk about the French. So, during World War I, there were over 1 million French soldiers that were killed in World War I. That's more soldiers, U.S. soldiers, that have died in combat combined in all of our wars. So a lot of Frenchmen died in World War I. And that led a lot of intellectuals to ask the question, how did this happen? The horrors of war, these countries battling against one another. How did it come to this? And the answer they came up with was patriotism. All these different countries loving, being devoted to their countries, and then they end up battling it out. And so what happened in France after World War I is they began promoting two new ideas, internationalism and pacifism. They changed the history books. They were revised to conform to these ideas. Soldiers that were once depicted as national heroes were now rewritten to be depicted as victims of war. Marshal Philippe Pétain, who fought for the French, he was a victor at Verdun, he warned in 1934 that teachers were trying to raise our sons in ignorance of and in contempt of the fatherland. That's what he said. So what was the result of the assault on patriotism in France? That's what I want us to start by looking at here today. So the war to end all wars, as the intellectuals called it, World War I, was just a stepping stone to an even greater conflict, World War II. It wasn't the war to end all wars. So during World War I, France fought valiantly against the German invaders for 4 years. 4 years they held off the Germans. World War II, how long did it take? 6 weeks. Just 6 weeks for them to fall to the Nazis. They had better weapons, but they were demoralized as a country. So at the bitter end of the defeat, the head of the French Teachers Union was told this. He was told, "You are partially responsible for our defeat." And so I want us to ask, as we reflect on the French today, as Americans, with the 4th of July right around the corner, what is our situation here today in America? Gallup, they did a poll and found that U.S. national pride has fallen to an all-time low. An all-time low. They say American pride has continued its downward trajectory, reaching the lowest point since Gallup's initial measurement in 2001. I was a sophomore in high school in 2001. All right, and I think we all feel it, right? We feel this arc of patriotism going down in our society, right? YouGov, they found the same thing. They say that on this Independence Day from 2020, last year, Americans are less likely to describe themselves as very patriotic than they did 2 years ago. There's a skepticism. Hey, good to see you. There's a skepticism that is rising in our country towards patriotism. There's a narrative that's being portrayed in the media and in academia that patriotism is somehow supremacism, white nationalism, chauvinism, something like that. And there's a lot of Americans that are buying into that, right? I don't want to be a chauvinist. I don't want to be a white supremacist, okay? So I think it's taking on a negative connotation. So let's ask the question, what's so important about patriotism? What would, let's think about this. Maybe the world would be a better place without patriotism. Maybe they got it right? Maybe patriotism is detrimental to the world. That's what we're going to look at here tonight. And the first thing we want to do is define our term, patriotism. I've already told you that this is a loaded term. It's loaded by academics, it's loaded by the media, chauvinism, white supremacy, white nationalism, that sort of thing. It's what people are trying to equate it to now. But if you look it up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition that they give us is simply love or devotion to one's country. Simply love or devotion to your country. So let's just bring it down one level of abstraction to think about this, okay? To unload the term a little bit. Is it okay? Oh, get that phone. Is it okay for you to be proud of your state of Ohio? Most of you here from Ohio. We might have one Pennsylvania person here. Most of you are from Ohio. Is that okay? I think so. What do you think of? Let's just open it up here real quick. What do you love about Ohio?
Green.
It's green.
Good sports.
Good sports teams. The Browns did all right last year, huh? Here are some things that I love about Ohio when I think about it. I think about going to Columbus for an Ohio State Buckeye game. If you've ever been in, I can't remember what the name of that building is, but they have the skull sessions there. The band comes in, they get everybody all riled up, and the crowd is electric, and then the team comes in, and the coach gives a speech. It's just like, it's an incredible experience. If you've never experienced it, it's free. You can go and check it out. It's a really cool experience. That's what I think of when I think of Ohio. There's a huge level of pride to be a part of what Ohio has to offer and to be a part of the Buckeyes. I also think of Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where my son Micah gets the best treatment in the world, right? I love that. I think it's cool. I think about Youngstown, a struggling old steel town. I think about that. I think about my own street, where I live, and the neighbors and the houses, and Mill Creek Park that's right down the road. I think about my own house, my red brick house that's got lots of character, that's built in the 1920s. I think about my own family. And if you follow what I'm doing, is we have a hierarchy going here. We have the country, we have the state, we have the region, we have the city, we have the street, we have the home, we have the family. All right? See what we're doing there? And at the very top, we have the country. So, is my family a part of the country? Yes. Is my home a part of the country? Yes. Is my street? Is my city? All those things, you can see they all fall under the umbrella of the United States of America. And all those things, I'm saying it's okay for me to be proud of my family. It's okay for me to love my home. It's okay to be devoted to my neighbors. Those are all good things. And we're going to talk about how those things can get out of balance. We need to talk about that. But a balanced patriotism that's defined strictly by love and devotion to one's country, I think I'll be arguing tonight that there's something good about that. The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. Having a good, healthy, balanced patriotism gives us a love for foreigners. It helps us to understand and empathize with them. Because when we realize that we love our home, we realize that they also love their home and they want to be left alone. We can empathize with the foreigner in that way. So, balanced patriotism is like loving your family. Why do you love your kids? Is it because they're smarter than the other kids? Is it because they're prettier, more athletic? Maybe. Funnier. The reason you love your kids more than other kids is why? They're your, Phil, yes! They're your kids. They may not be as funny. They might be uglier. They might be stupider. They might be all of those things, right? But that doesn't make you love them less. It doesn't make you love the smarter kids more, because they're not yours. You love your kids because they're yours. And the same is true of our country. The same is true of our country. America isn't perfect, believe it or not, but it's ours. Do you base your love or merit towards your kids because they've earned your love? You say, kid, I'm only going to love you if you earn it. No. You love them regardless. It's not based on merit. It's based on they are yours. Do you only love your kids if they behave? No. You love them because they're yours. I know my kids definitely don't behave, and they make me upset. But what? When my son does something wrong, I correct him. Why? Because I love him. because he is mine. That's the reason I correct him. And the same is true of our country. When our country gets something wrong, we have to correct it if we love it. That's balanced patriotism. It's because I love America that I either have something complimentary or critical to say to her. Complimentary or critical, right? It's because of we love them. And Carl Schurz, a U.S. senator in the 1800s, said, "My country, right or wrong? My country, right or wrong? If right, to be kept right. If wrong, to be set right." And I think that's a pretty good principle for us, right? And let's think about this. Ronald Reagan, he formally apologized to Japanese Americans on behalf of the country for unjust internment camps during World War II. Was that unpatriotic? I would argue that it's actually a form of healthy patriotism. Realize, I love my country enough to acknowledge that we did something wrong. I believe there is an instance of Ronald Reagan being a true patriot. But patriotism can become out of balance, thinking that my country can do no wrong. Like a parent who says to a teacher, I hope none of you have done this, "My kid would never do that." And if you're a teacher, you've probably heard that a couple times a week, right? My kid would never do that. You always feel the need to defend, even when your child is making mistakes. The same is true of our country. And if you are always defending America, never being willing to be critical of mistakes that are made, I would argue that you're not a true patriot, that you have an unbalanced form of patriotism. And it's a form of hatred, I would even say. If you love your kids, you have to correct them. You can't leave them as they are. You have to help them become even greater than where they are right now. That's what parenting is all about. And that's what patriotism, I believe, is about. And yet there are parents who have no love for their children and disown them. And we're going to look at that here briefly. What about those Americans that just disown America? They have no love. They have no devotion for America. Let's ask that question. If not patriotism, what? If not patriotism, then what? We have a couple options. Number one, anarchism. You could try that out if you want it. They tried it out in Seattle. How'd it go? Chop, Chaz, whatever you want to call it. Because of human nature, things quickly happen. It's unavoidable. Something like a government naturally forms. You have a bunch of armed citizens kind of come in, and guess what? They're the cops now. They're the military. All right? So anarchism just doesn't work because of our human nature. Our second one, cosmopolitanism. What is this? The idea that all human beings are members of a single community. There's just one community out there in the world. Its adherents believe humans can and should be world citizens in a universal community. And this is an idea that's very, very attractive to a lot of intellectuals. This is a very attractive idea to intellectuals. This idea of cosmopolitan, cosmo meaning world, polity meaning citizen, where we get the word polite from, right? World citizen, that's what cosmopolitan means. And this is what the great philosopher John Lennon was talking about when he wrote the song Imagine. He said this, "Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace." We'll finish the song in a second, all right? Because I know you're excited about it. But just notice here what he's saying. He's saying no countries, no religion, nothing to kill or die for. Notice he thinks the reasons people kill isn't because of our fallen human nature. Maybe we would say as Christians our sin nature. But because of countries, patriotism, and because of religion. Those are the reasons that people kill one another. Religion and country. In order to have countries, what do you got to have? One thing you got to have is you got to have borders, right? You got to have borders for there to be countries. So in this worldview, if you just erase the borders, there would be world peace. All right. Then he goes on to say, "You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. It's a very different worldview, isn't it? He's talking about a utopia. This is a utopian idea. And what does this word, did you ever look up what the word utopia means? The word utopia in the Greek means not place. That's what it literally means. And then in the Latin, it means literally nowhere. That's what the word utopia means. Nowhere. And that's exactly where it gets you, in my opinion. Absolutely nowhere. And so I'm imagining most of us are Christians here. So from the Christian worldview, what do we see? We look back into the Old Testament. We see this very interesting story where the peoples of the world, they don't want to follow God's mandate for mankind to spread out into the world. What they do is they build a tower. They build a tower, the Tower of Babel, as you know, right? They all want to stay in one place, to have a one world government. And that is just not God's plan. You can argue with them if you want about it, but that is not God's plan. All right, so maybe you say, I don't care about being a citizen of America or a citizen of the world. I don't care about being a cosmopolitan. What I care about is being a citizen of heaven. I'm a Christian, and that's all I care about is being a citizen of heaven. I don't need America. Okay. Let's think about this. That is exactly what the Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and that is exactly what they act out. They act it all the way out. They don't vote. They don't join the military. They don't run for office. They act it all the way out, right? They have no need for government. And so I guess I would say, and maybe I'm wrong about this. We can discuss this if you think I'm wrong. I would say I will take your argument about not being a citizen of America seriously when you decide not to vote. I'll definitely take you a lot more seriously. You decide, you know what? I'm not a citizen of America. I'm a citizen of heaven. I don't need to vote. I'll take you more seriously. But I don't imagine a whole lot of people are willing to go there, take their argument that far. But to me, I think that's the logical conclusion of the argument. In reality, we see in Romans 13 that God creates government. He designs government. He institutes government. In Romans 13, we see rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. This is God's design. We live in a constitutional republic. We, the people, the power rests in all us here. All the people out there, the power in our republic rests in us. And we have human rights that are protected, individual human rights that are protected by a constitution. Okay? So we, as Christians, we ought to have something to say about how our government is run, shouldn't we? We ought to have something to say about it. And we have the privilege of having something to say about it. So, I'm going to start wrapping things up now. Why should you, if we've defined patriotism to be love and devotion to a country, why should you, if you're looking for a reason here tonight, why should you love your country? Here's the number one reason I think you should love America. When World War I ended in 1919, the Ottoman Empire, the Habsburg Empire, and the Russian Empire were all broken up. They had to break up these empires and turn them into smaller countries. How were these new countries created? How did they divvy them up? Do we know the answer? Ethnicity. They were all broken up by ethnicity. So you are a Pole. This is now Poland. You are a Latvian. This is now going to be Latvia. You are a Finn. This is now going to be Finland. They were all broken up by ethnicity. Tell me, how was America founded? What was America founded on? The melting pot? Freedom? Okay. Okay. Let me give you the answer that G.K. Chesterton gave when he came here in the early 1900s. This is what G.K. Chesterton said. He said, America is the only nation in the world that is founded on a creed. We're the only nation in the world that's founded on an idea. And what is that idea? You here tonight, you American, sitting here. What is the idea that our country is founded upon? It's not founded on you being a Scot. It's not founded on you being English. It's not founded on you being Italian. It's founded on an idea that allows us to come together cohesively around one idea. The idea is this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And you want to talk about speaking truth to power? They were saying that to the greatest superpower in the world at the time. They were revolutionaries. They were basically saying, we're going to war with you guys. The greatest superpower in the world. This isn't just some fancy thing we're reading about in a textbook. This isn't Thomas Jefferson's blog post. He's just kind of rattling off about some of his thoughts. This is them declaring independence from a superpower. And they go on to list why they were doing it. They list all the ways in which the King of Great Britain has usurped and tyrannized them. And you have it right here. I gave it to most of you if you want to follow along. Okay? This is going to be at the very end. What I'm about to read is going to be at the very end. And maybe you've never caught this before, but I'm going to read it to you now. So they list off all their grievances against the King of Great Britain. And then they say, we, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, declare that these united colonies are free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may have right to do. Now get this. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. What happened to these 56 signers? These 56 men who signed their name on the dotted line saying, I'm going to war against a superpower. What happened to these men? I'll tell you what happened to them. 5 of them were captured by British as traitors and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 9 fought and died from wounds and or hardships of the Revolutionary War. That's what happened to them. They didn't know if they were going to make it as heroes into the textbooks. All they knew is that they believed the words that they signed their name to. At the Battle of Yorktown, Thomas Nelson Jr. noted that the British General Cornwallis had taken over his home for his headquarters. The owner quietly urged General George Washington to open fire. The home was destroyed, and Nelson died a bankrupt man. I've never heard of Thomas Nelson Jr. before. Have you? I've never heard his name. But if you look on that document, you'll see his name there. He signed his name to the Declaration of Independence. He was willing to sacrifice everything, even his own possessions, his own home, even his own life, because he believed so deeply in the words he signed his name to. What about you? Those words I gave to you, you hold in your hand. Do you believe those words? Do you believe they're true? Are you willing to sacrifice anything to defend those words? Maybe you got to sacrifice one day a month to come and meet with me so we can talk about what's going on. Yeah, okay. Sure. Maybe you need to tell the truth at your work. Maybe risk losing your job. Maybe risk losing a client. Are you willing to make a sacrifice because these words are true? Maybe some relationships. Maybe you got to read more. Sacrifice some of your time binge watching your favorite show. Maybe you got to read and educate yourself. Right? You got to tell the truth. And sometimes telling the truth comes with consequences. And sacrifices have to be made. You got to teach your kids. Maybe you got to run for school board. These are all sacrifices. It's not your house getting blown up. Not losing your life yet, right? But sacrifices have to be made. So I want to end with this thought from a former president, Ronald Reagan. He said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States, where men were free." I believe that to be true. That's why I'm here with you tonight. As I believe we're one generation away, and we always have been, but maybe now more than ever, we're one generation away from losing our freedom. And something has to be done about it. So this weekend, don't just celebrate America. Don't be a fair weather patriot. If these words are true, then you ought to be willing to sacrifice something to defend them. Freedom is one generation away from extinction. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down. Happy 4th of July.